Shall we get moving?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, everybody. I'm Linda Conway. I'm the Executive Director of NEMPA. So we've put together this webinar to help you make the most of your fiscal sponsorship with grants, foundations, philanthropy, and marketing. What we want to do today is talk about how to do this with your local community news fund of New England. Most of you that have signed up today are already participating in the local community news fund of New England. And what that is it was created by the New England Press Association Scholarship Fund to help you raise funds to pay for essential local journalism. The way it works is local news organizations receive customized campaign portals to accept tax-deductible donations from individuals, businesses, community foundations, philanthropists, and more to help fund the local reporting and coverage. Our Press Association, NEMPA's Press Association Scholarship Fund is a 501c3 charitable trust, and we act as the fiscal sponsor and administrator of the local community news fund of New England. And our nonprofit status allows us to work with you as a sponsor to help donors make tax-deductible donations. It's a significant benefit for for-profit media organizations. So joining us today, our main speaker is going to be Dawn Duncan. Dawn is the owner of the Grant Connection. She is a past president of Pioneer Fundraising Resources, consulting firm specializing in providing grant writing services to nonprofit organizations. She's raised over $30 million for a variety of causes. She works doing grant research and writing grants, and she holds a master's degree from Harvard University and a master's degree from Boston University. She's served on a number of boards for nonprofit and organizations, and she's here to help share her expertise today. Welcome, Dawn.
Thank you very much, and hello, everyone. Glad to be here today. So we're just going to talk about fiscal sponsorship and some ways y'all can maybe, look at philanthropy, grants, foundations, and things like that. So keep it fairly informal, and then see how it goes. So first, I thought it might be helpful just to give a brief overview of what is fiscal sponsorship. A lot of people hear the term and they don't necessarily really even know what it means, or might find it kind of intimidating, or how does it apply to me. So I think the simplest definition of fiscal sponsorship in my mind is basically when a 501c3 nonprofit provides its tax-exempt status for someone else so they can do some kind of a community benefit project. That's kind of the simplest definition, because what you'll often find is having a nonprofit can be a lot of work. Like, there's a lot of requirements and a lot of paperwork and a lot of things you have to do to have and maintain a nonprofit organization. So but there's also a lot of people who often want to just do something beneficial for the community, and they don't necessarily want to set up a whole separate nonprofit, or want to have to mess with all the kind of paperwork and monitoring and all that you have to do. So for that purpose, fiscal sponsorship can be really helpful. So the way that there's so many different ways it can play out. Here, some examples that I have listed here in these bullets. One, often used for one-time fundraising events. That's a really common way fiscal sponsorship tends to be used, especially if there's, say, some kind of urgent need to do something. That's probably really applicable right now with the COVID crisis going on. I hear from people often about, major needs in the community around COVID on every level, whether it's like social services, food services, even probably in the fields you all are in the news field with, organizations needing additional funds, communities have all kinds of needs. There's so many people unemployed, restaurants closing. Anyway, so just to say that right now is probably a really good time for fiscal sponsorship. Scholarship funds are another option for fiscal sponsorship, especially for smaller one-time or even ongoing, but smaller scholarship funds that would be used to, say, help kids go to college for particular things, and also for projects that may eventually obtain 501c3 status. I myself have a small nonprofit, and I've worked with a lot of startups to kind of incubate them, organizations that eventually do get their own 501c3 status, but to start, it can be a little, there, like I said, there's a lot of paperwork and things, so it can be helpful to have somebody kind of incubate you. Second way fiscal sponsorship is used is a process for community benefit projects to be launched without having to obtain it. I think that's probably the most important piece of it, because again, nonprofits can be really, there's a lot to launch them, a lot to get them going. So, and there's a lot of people who are even and working in the for-profit world, but they want to do something really helpful for their community, but it can be kind of overwhelming and you don't know where to start. And if there's already an existing 501c3 that has all those things in place, you can launch those projects much more quickly without having to obtain your own 501c3 status, which also it can take up to a year to even get your 501c3 status. So that can, you know, be a big burden. An existing 501c3 typically sponsors a project, usually for a small administrative fee, because there is, you know, paperwork and things involved. And you just have to make sure that the project's in line with the mission of the 501c3. And with, it sounds like with what you all are doing, that's, you all are our news organization, so that's probably kind of automatic with what you're doing, which is a great community thing. Okay, next slide. Okay, how can fiscal sponsorship be used? I think these ways that I have listed here are probably the most common ways that fiscal sponsorship can be used. Raising funds is probably the biggest one, because the reality is if you're seeking to raise funds in a community and to get people to make donations, the bottom line is for a donation to be tax deductible, it just legally has to be given to a 501c3 tax exempt organization. So you really do need a 501c3 to be able to do that. And raising funds is probably the most common thing that fiscal sponsorship is used for. It can also be used to establish community benefit programs, like I've talked about a little bit in the previous slide. You know, based on whatever the particular needs in any community is, usually the people in the community and those working in the community have the best ideas and understanding about what the needs are. So that's a really good use of fiscal sponsorship to establish, you know, all kinds of different community benefit programs, depending on what the need is. They can also be used, fiscal sponsorship can also be used to strengthen public relations and community goodwill, because it gives you an opportunity to, you know, let other people see that there's other people in the community that are trying to work together and do things to help benefit the community. And especially during the time we're living in right now with COVID and everything, I think that's really helpful and just makes people feel, you know, more cohesive and better about things going on. It can be used to address issues in your community. You might be, you know, and being in the news industry, I would think that you all have a good pulse of what's going on in your community. So if you find there's a particular need or something you were unaware of, you know, fiscal sponsorship can really be used to address these issues, because it gives you a kind of framework and an infrastructure to help set something up, oftentimes rather quickly. So, next slide. Okay, so some strategies that can help make your fiscal sponsorship campaign a success. This is kind of like things to do and ways to think about it, in my experience, that help make it more likely to succeed. First of all, I think it's important to be clear about your goals. That may sound really basic, but oftentimes when we're working on community benefit projects in particular too, there can often be so many different needs and things to address that it can sometimes feel a bit overwhelming. So I think that it's important when you're starting a campaign of some kind to be clear about what you're trying to achieve, what your goals are. You want to be sure that what you're wanting to do does align with the work of the 501c3 organization, so that you don't get into, trouble if you're doing something that's outside the framework of the 501c3. And again, within the context of this organization and what you all are doing, that's probably already built in pretty well with the news work that you're doing. I think it's important when you're talking about fiscal sponsorship to talk about how the campaign is a natural fit or outgrowth of the typical daily work that you're doing, because that makes it more palatable to people that you're attempting to get to donate or participate when things have kind of a natural, it's kind of the natural next step, or it makes sense in helping the community. I think that that's really important for engaging people in it. And finally, setting clear expectations about how the fund will be managed. This is more of a, communication process between the fiscal sponsor and the fiscal sponsee, just so that you're clear about the process that you'll be using for acquiring funding and distributing funding, how you'll report funding and things like that. It doesn't have to be terribly complicated, but I think it's important to be clear about that. So that you don't run into communication issues or things like that down the road. Okay, next slide. Okay, so that's just a quick overview of kind of what fiscal sponsorship is and how it can be used. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about philanthropy and grants as part of your fundraising strategy. So philanthropy is just an overall broad term. If you hear the word philanthropy, we often hear it around. It's just a general term for giving funds to the community, and it really includes all kinds of giving, individual donations, foundation grants, corporate grants, all those kind of things. The largest percentage of philanthropy actually is individual gifts. In fact, in a typical year, about 70% of all philanthropy is given through individual donations. So it tends to be probably the best way to engage and get people to get funding, especially with something to get started. And when individuals give to something, they tend to also, give for a longer period of time because they're more invested. Grants are gifts of money that do not have to be paid back, and they're typically made by private foundations, corporate foundations, and government agencies. You've probably all heard of grants. Next slide. Foundations as part of a fundraising strategy. So foundations are a particular kind of nonprofit organization that typically support public charities, which are 501c3 nonprofit organizations. Foundations include many types. I'm just going to run through a few, because if you're doing research on foundations yourself, you'll probably come across these different terms and it'll help you to know what they are. Community foundations are one type of foundation. So those are foundations that give to a particular geographic area. And I was doing some research. There's a handout that you'll be getting after this webinar, which has several foundations that do fund news-related things. And there were a lot of community foundations on there, which kind of makes sense based on what I know about foundations, that they give in a particular area. So like you might see a foundation called the Boston Foundation, the Central Mass Foundation, the Rhode Island Foundation. They give in a particular geographic area. Another kind is corporate foundations, which, as they sound, are foundations that are established by corporations like Target, Walmart. Big corporations have big foundations. Bank foundations are another kind. I like to list those as their own category because banks tend to give a lot of support to local communities, so they're a really good potential source. Family foundations are another one. Now, I've noticed over my about 25 years in doing grant writing that family foundations are one that really, really continues to expand. Those are just foundations that are set up by basically wealthy individuals and family members to kind of work on whatever issues, are important to them. And then issue-specific foundations would oftentimes in their in the name of the foundation, they actually have they have what issue they work on, like say the Arthritis Foundation of America or something like that. So that's just to give you kind of a quick overview of what kinds of things you may find when you're actually researching potential foundation grants. Okay, how do you find opportunities? There's several different sources. Honestly, if you do a general internet search and put in the word grants and foundations and kind of an issue you're looking at, you can probably actually find some decent links to potential foundations that way. There's a lot of information out there. As a professional grant writer, I tend to use the Foundation Center online directory, which is a paid subscription service. And if you're going to get serious about doing grant writing and foundation work, that's definitely something you might want to explore. There's different levels of subscriptions. I think some of them are fairly affordable. But it's a really good source because it has over 100,000 foundations on it, and it really categorizes by different categories. And the resource Tara will be sharing with you, I literally did that search in about half an hour and found, well over 100 potential foundations for news-related organizations. So that's a good source if you're really serious about wanting to do foundation work. Companies that you're connected to are definitely a good potential to look at for potential foundation and private corporation grants. Like if you talk to people at companies, oftentimes employees, managers will have some say in where the funding goes to from a company. Wealthy individuals often establish foundations for causes they're interested in. So if they're kind of known wealthy individuals in your community, or you have friends, colleagues, et cetera, it can be worth talking to them as well, because you never know when you ask, who might be interested in reaching out and helping. Okay. How do you approach them? Contacts that you may have are often a really good start. Again, I find when I'm teaching grant writing, a lot of people feel some discomfort with asking people to help them or telling them what they're doing. But I have found just talking to contacts can sometimes result in amazing connections that come about. So don't, never underestimate the importance of that. You just never know where things may lead. If you're doing kind of grant writing, foundation research, when you find a listing of a foundation, you can always review the guidelines of a foundation, and it'll tell you what you have to do to apply, and it'll tell you if they accept applications. And if they do and they're a potential fit for the work that you're doing, it can definitely be worth, filling out an application and asking for funding that way. You can also send general letters to foundations to let them know about your work. Because it's such a big world, the foundation world, that sometimes organizations don't know all the good things going on in the community. So I'm a big proponent of letting as many people as possible, especially in your local community, know about what you're doing and getting potential funding that way. So that was a really quick overview of, fiscal sponsorship, philanthropy, grants, et cetera. So now we're going to turn it over to Tara Cleary, who's Director of Social Media Marketing here, to go from here. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. So we're going to focus this part of the presentation on the marketing your campaign for individual donations, which is, as Dawn said, I guess is the largest percentage of philanthropy. So we're going to focus here on the Jamestown Press as an example from the local Community News Fund of New England. We're also fortunate to have Robert Berzak on the phone with us, the publisher, and he's going to be joining us for the Q&A at the end. So if you have any specific questions, he'll be able to address that. I mean, there's the obvious parts of using your newspaper and your website to market your campaign, but I feel that's just the beginning. And I spent some time talking to Robert about the things that he thought made his campaign so successful. And in a little over, I think it's been about 2 weeks, he's raised over $17,000. So he has been quite successful with his campaign. And one of the biggest points that resonated with me about that was having a true connection with the community. I think sometimes in the media we think we do, but maybe this could be an opportunity to build on or strengthen connections with the community, and having that genuine story of why you're doing the fundraising, what you're going to be using the funds for, and how that's going to help the community. And then I just really liked this quote from my interview where he said you have to connect with people on a one-to-one level, not just an institution talking. And I think that happens in a lot of business. We tend to use our institutional voice and not really use our personal voice to make that connection. So I think in this case that's needed to really get the results. And they do have a generous community in Jamestown, Rhode Island. So I just, my next slide, just before I leave this slide over on the right, is the front page. It's just a snip of the front page story that he ran when he launched the campaign. And I'm going to be providing the PDFs of the pages that I'm referencing, so you can see the how it was presented in the paper. So as I said, they raised over $17,000 since July 16th. I'm going to cover the community profile, the circulation news coverage, and how they did their marketing, and then an incentive program that Robert came up with to really drive participation. So important to note here, for our local community news fund members, we do provide a donation form for you to run in the paper that's branded with your name on it. So obviously we know when the donations come in who to attribute them to. And we did a little research, and out of the 126 donations that have come in for the Jamestown Press, more than 60% of them were received by check and in the mail. So I think for newspapers, especially established publications in their market, this is going to be a huge driver for you. So remember that. So Jamestown, you can see I put a picture up here of where it is. It's an island, but it's connected by 2 bridges, 5,500 residents in the summer, 4,500 in the winter, and 3,400 postal addresses. And Robert feels like they genuinely have a connection with the paper. There is usually a lot of support for community events, volunteerism, and then this mentality of support what's here because it's ours. So what's the general profile of the Jamestown Press? It's a weekly newspaper. It does have a free subscription model, and it is mailed to every postal address. There's little paid mailing. One of the things that Robert did when he purchased the paper is he added full color capability on every page. And he did this by finding a new printer and reducing the cost. But he also has found that just in terms of newspaper revenue, it's added some incremental revenue because now he doesn't have to say, oh, do you want full color? And it's $400 to add full color. He can add color to even a small ad and gain a little bit amount of incremental revenue, even from smaller advertisers, by adding color. So collectively, that's definitely made an impact. And they really focus on writing about what happens where they live. He said they really don't cover anything else. And he also said that a lot of the larger publications around them don't really cover anything about them either. So it's kind of both ways. So, you know, this is really the only place to get the local news about Jamestown. And there's no expectation that readers are going to find national or even other state information unless it's really important. And the other thing he found that contributes is that they run a lot of photos. And if you notice in one of the earlier slides that Dawn presented, I used a photo from the Jamestown Farm, a local organization, and it showed volunteers, volunteering with their masks and socially distant. And, this is still going on, even though, we're in the COVID-19 times. So he feels that, having that photographer going out, taking the pictures and running the pictures, either in stories or in photo essays, really does draw high readership. And he gets fantastic feedback from his advertisers in terms of results, no matter where their ads run. So on the right is the ad that launched the campaign. And again, we'll provide you with the PDF of the page that this ran on. So how did they market it? The first week launch included a front page story, also an editorial, an ad, and then there was also an ad on the website homepage. I mean, there still is an ad on the website homepage. The second week, again, this will be in your collateral material. They did a really nice thank you ad. And he also came up with this unique chamber bucks promotion. So this is something where he's purchasing with his own funds, chamber bucks. And for every $100 that people are donating, they're going to receive a $20 chamber buck certificate that can only be spent on the businesses that are on the island. So it felt that was a win-win for everyone. So sorry about that. I'm gonna open it up now for Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, we can unmute everyone and just let people talk and ask a question of either Linda, Dawn, Robert, or myself.
Before we do that, Tara, can I ask Robert? Robert, could you say a couple of words? I mean, you've done such a fantastic job, launching your campaign, and I know you attribute a lot of it to the generosity of your readers. But can you tell us a little bit about, was it a lot of work for you to put together? Can you speak just a little bit?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me. No, it wasn't a lot of work. You folks were wonderful as far as helping us, with the kind of furniture structure of things, and Tara getting us material, etc. And then me and my production person kind of tweaked a little bit of what we did to kind of personalize it a little bit, like we did the thing with the chamber box for that one. And she mentioned the thank you ads. What we've been doing with the thank you ads is we're actually taking some of the quotes and comments from people that they're sending and putting those with those, so we kind of again get their voices, and it kind of, I think, resonates more with our readership, that they see their friends and neighbors speaking in this way about the paper and why it's important to them. So that's kind of the crux of what we're doing with the thank you follow-up ads for now, at least with the first couple. Also, my staff has been here for a long time. The photographer Andrew's been here for 15 years, my salesperson for 25, my editor for 10. These people are known in this community. It's a small community. Everyone has dealt with all of them. So I think there's a personal resonance with a lot of our readers that even if they don't know me, because I've only been here for less than 5 or etc., they know one of them. They've dealt with one of them. They understand there's that connection. And in the op-ed piece that I wrote, I talked about that connection that they all have with our staff, and how that most of them live here on the island too, so they're local residents. So again, they're friends, they're neighbors, just people they've seen. We have pictures of kids that we've first picture we had on paper is from when they were 4 years old and a Girl Scout, and now we have pictures of them being graduating as valedictorian of their college or whatever type of thing. They literally have grown up on the pages of this paper. I'm sure a lot of your other members have that same experience, and we just try to kind of tap into that this is you're touched on your connection to the community. And I think having that kind of staff that has that kind of connection has definitely helped us out a lot.
Great, thank you. And I forgot to mention in the beginning, if anybody had any questions, you can type them in the chat button. I'm trying to unmute everybody, but for some reason it's not unmuting everybody. So if you are trying to talk and you're not able to, if you want to send a question in the chat box, we'd be more than happy to answer any of your questions.
Looks like a few people are unmuted.
It won't let me unmute everybody for some reason, unless you'd like to try.
No, oh, no, I just was looking at I don't,
Okay. Well, I mean, anybody could always send any follow-up questions over to myself or to Tara, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. We're here to help you make the most of your fundraising efforts. So if there's anything that we can do to help any of you. we're more than happy to.
Lynn, if I could add just one more thing.
Sure.
So with reference to the chamber checks and us doing that to help the other businesses, just obviously allows us all to be in this together. But the other thing I noticed, and I did some glance notes before we did, of all of our contributions, 60% are at least $100, which was the threshold, and 45% have been exactly $100. And I don't think that's coincidence.
I don't think that's a coincidence either. And I have to tell you, I thought it was a fantastic idea to do that because it helps all of the other local businesses as well, because they're spending those chamber bucks at the other local businesses who we're all suffering, a little bit from.
And as a resident, I think people like to get something, so it's being to tax it up to get that. So you're getting a benefit as a donor. So I think it helps them. So if you're going to donate $75, their comfort level, well, might as well do 100.
Right.
we have one question from Lisa. Has Robert done any live events associated with the launch? ? Zoom ?
Not so far. I've talked about doing some things maybe down the road when things are probably a little better. Maybe some events and stuff, because again, there are a lot of fundraisers that are held here on the island for politicians and other groups and organizations. I think that would be a good way to get a lot of people in place to try and raise some money. But for now, it's only been 3 weeks and we're just kind of done the stuff through the paper. In part because of it's new and we just launched it, and second reason because it's harder to obviously get people to go out. And this is also an older community and more. This is a community that in general doesn't like to cross the bridge during good times. so to try and get them to come out during something like this is even harder. You talked about most of the ones being mailed. I'm not surprised you have most of the ones have been mailed to you. I actually have a stack on my desk here, people that mailed them to us with your information there because they just thought this was the place to send it, and including people who really dropped cash in my mailbox too.
Wow.
So that's this kind of community it is. So to do something like that, I want to kind of wait till we're maybe some safer, firmer ground that they would feel more comfortable doing that. But that's something we're definitely thinking about.
I really, I thought that the ads that you ran, I saw your thank you ad that you ran with quotes from people. I mean, because people have left some really, really nice quotes, really nice messages for you and for your staff. And I liked the way that you ran that thank you ad where you pulled out, separate quotes. One of the other thoughts that I had to encourage people to do is to run perhaps a full page ad every once in a while that lists the donors. The donors that want to be listed. Some donors don't want their name listed, but to run another ad just saying, thanks so much for the generous support of our community, including the following people. Just to remind people. It's also a reminder to others.
And that's something that we do. Typically, the local fireworks that a local group raises money for, and that's one of the things that we do for them is we give them a free ad every year to run the list of all the people who donated at the different levels. So they get their names out there.
And I know some papers are running a subscription drive along with their fundraising. So you could either sign up for a subscription, give a donation, or you can give a gift of a subscription to somebody else as a way to support the paper. Okay. I think that's all of the questions that we have for now. So as I said, if anybody has any follow-up questions that you'd like to send along, or if anybody's on the call and they haven't signed up for the foundation to begin running your own fundraising efforts, just let me know, give me a call or send me an email or reach out to Tara. I think everybody has our contact information, but it will also be in the follow-up email that Tara will send out to everybody. So thank you